I'm joined once again by my Boston Public Radio co-host Marge Regan, along with Martha Coakley, a partner at Foley Hoag, and the district attorney who successfully prosecuted former priest John Gagan and Paul Shanley for abuse-related crimes. Thanks for being here, Martha. And Mitchell Garabedian, who has represented thousands of victims of church abuse, including the two you just heard from. Mitchell, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I know you've spoken to a ton of your clients, survivors, since this yesterday. Is that typical reaction, the two people you had today with you at 11:30?
It's typical, and I've had worse reaction from clients. I've had victims really unraveling, and my heart really goes out to them. But of a real concern are the parents of the victims who committed suicide, because they are just at the bottom of the barrel emotionally, and they're beside themselves in hearing this news.
What's tomorrow going to be like when they see the Pope at this funeral mass for Bernard Law?
It's going to be more of the same. It's more salt to the wound, as was said earlier. It's a slap in the face. It's insulting. And if these criminals weren't hiding behind a cloak of religion, maybe they'd be in jail.
You tried to prosecute one of these. You wouldn't call them criminals, but I would be, because he was acquitted, this priest Manning. And from my recollection, in the mid-'90s, he was not only acquitted, but had the support of his parishioners, and there was cheering when he was acquitted. And then Gagan, you indicted in 1999. What was the feeling in your office, Martha Coakley, about going up against what Mike Resendez just said, and I think Phil was nodding in agreement, the most powerful institution in Boston?
Well, I remember the case against Father Manning. 40 or more parishioners came on a bus every day and filled that jury room. It had to have some impact, I think. And I say, you know, there was an FBI agent who came in and testified that the priest hadn't abused him. We had a young man who had recanted, so it was a tough case. But had that been 10 years later, 15 years later, it wouldn't have been a tough case.
What did change, in your estimation, you're the non-legal person here, behind that mid-'90s prosecution that failed and the prosecution that succeeded against Gagan? Well, he was indicted in 99 and I think convicted in 2002.
Personally, I thought the testimony of the parents and the letters that they wrote to Cardinal Law, before that Cardinal Madeira, saying this is what happened to my child, and they were so personal and so detailed. I said, how can people be thinking that these people are out to get money or to go after the Catholic Church? I mean, there was a huge denial at the beginning. I remember members of my family saying this is just not true. But when you have so many numbers, it's almost like the Me Too moment. When you have dozens of people saying the same thing, at some point you have to say.
And Jim, if I can remember,
Sure.
We talked about Father Porter a little while ago. I think people thought that was a unique, anomalous situation.
That's what Law called it, aberrational,
yes.
didn't he?
And so then when prosecutors and others started to look at these cases, and remember, they didn't have to report these cases. I know Attorney Garabedian brought some young boys to me, victims of Father Gagan. They wouldn't have come to us through DCF because they didn't have to report. But when we started those cases, there was a chorus in the public like, oh, this is like the daycare cases.
Yes.
These are just prosecutors looking for another place
Which you were
to
criticized for, too,
Yes,
by the way.
yes, of
Did
course.
they do enough? I mean the generic Martha Coakley. Did the prosecutors do enough then to try to stem this in its early? Well, it's not early, but earlier than ultimately when it happened?
Well, I think what the foundation to all of the prosecution, a solid prosecution, is evidence, and the evidence was in the secret documents that we uncovered, and they came pouring out.
And we all remember that from the film, if you weren't reading the Globe. Your former boss became Attorney General and held a press conference, and for the reasons you just mentioned, said things like, it borders on the unbelievable, Law bears, quote, ultimate responsibility. Hundreds of priests, many hundreds of survivors, victims over decades, but he chose not to prosecute. Do you think that was the right decision?
I don't think chose is the right word. I think Tom Riley took that investigation incredibly seriously. I think the fact that he didn't have to report, there was no reporting requirement. Don't forget.
Priests were not mandatory reporters
Correct.
at the time.
And so the church wasn't either. And, you know, for better or worse, there were civil suits. I'm not going to be critical of them, but civil suits that settled, and they were confidential.
You felt differently about that at the time, didn't you?
I thought Riley should have indicted him and just let the chips fall where they may, because I think it meant so much, and you know much better than I do, Mitchell, to people that survived this, to have this guy do the perp walk and to be hauled into court.
The victims needed validation. They needed closure. They needed to try to heal. And they needed a voice. They needed to be heard.
Did they feel, when I was looking at the picture today, as I'm sure virtually all of this area was, of you deposing Cardinal Law? I think it was in 2002 or something, in a Gagan-related matter. Did you never talk about your own feelings about this? You're always focused on survivors, which I think is commendable. But did you derive any level of satisfaction by having him have to answer your questions that day? And did your clients get any satisfaction from the fact that he couldn't run away from you?
The clients received a lot of satisfaction by the fact that he was deposed, that he had to answer questions. And deposing Cardinal Law he was just a bland figure. You could sense his arrogance. You could sense his "you're not going to touch me" attitude.
Are the laws strong enough today? What are we, 15 years later? The laws strong enough? I mean, I know the statute of limitations has been changed in the last several years, but are the laws strong enough to deal with a comparable situation should it arise, Mitchell Garbian?
In Massachusetts, they're getting better. Across the country, they're not. You often hear opponents of victims speaking out saying that person should not be speaking out. They should try this case in court. But they can't try the case in court because the statute of limitations is run.
Are the laws strong enough in your estimation here?
Well, two things have happened. I think the reporting laws are stronger now. The church has to report. I think DA's offices have specialized child abuse units that have gotten better at this. And I think that the power of the church has also changed, that they no longer have the ability to enable, to hide, to move priests around. That's the biggest change, and that's the important thing. And we see this now in other cases where predators are supported in their movie companies and politics. That is all crumbling.
Media.
But some of this started with this not letting authority get away with enabling predators.
You see a common thread of sorts to what
I
we're
do.
living.
I think what's changed is attitudes. I mean, we did 50 years ago. You were not going to. Your priest was going to be able to do basically whatever he wanted. It was like the kids that got beat up by the nuns. Oh, the nuns, you must have done something wrong. So we've seen the priests. Now we've seen this Me Too moment, and I think there's a change. It's in attitudes that you don't think so.
No,
I think we believe. I think we believe victims.
Are you
a lot
shaking
more
your head
than we
about
used
a
to.
change in attitude in the church or in society at large?
In society. The church isn't going to change. They've been doing this for centuries. They've been raping kids at a wholesale pace for centuries. You can't keep track of the church. It's $1 trillion business. What is changing is society's attitude of, I better watch my child when that child's around a priest, or in Hollywood, or anywhere else. That's what's changing.
And I'll listen to my child.
But you know something?
That's right.
In defense of the Catholics that are not in the Vatican, I mean, you go to individual parishes, it is all about child. Everybody's got their CAP certification, child protection. They do, I think, at least the Catholics I know and in my parish, it is a big concern to watch what's going on. So they may not get it in the Vatican, but I think they might locally, at least from what I know in Boston.
You've said this a few times here and elsewhere. You think nothing has changed within the institution itself, at least within the hierarchy. Is that a fair?
Right now in my office, I have over 500 Catholic clergy sexual abuse cases. I'm fighting tooth and nail with law firms. I'm fighting tooth and nail with churches. I'm fighting with orders, religious orders, or dioceses or archdioceses are saying, you're not going to touch us, don't bother us.
So law lives and dies and nothing changes in your mind?
Well, the public is made more aware of the need to protect children. That's the success. The church has circled the wagons tighter than ever.
And victims have been willing to speak out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you think things have changed from the church?
I
You
do.
don't have the same sort of perspective, obviously, that he does. 'Cause
Yeah.
Why are you more
No,
optimistic
I
than he?
understand his position because he sees this, and you see Australia, you see all these other countries.
Yes.
I think the stranglehold has changed a little bit. That's not to say it's completely gone. But I do think that people are less beholden to priests and the authority. I think that parents are more willing to believe that anybody might be an abuser, and that's certainly what we do with prevention and telling kids to talk to their parents and parents to listen to them.
But but we'll end with where we were in the first segment. Is this commission that was appointed specifically to address this, according to virtually everybody, is doing absolutely
I think
nothing.
this is going to be the biggest blot on Pope Francis, is that he has not gotten it in any sense of the word, because if he had, they would have gone after the bishops. There would have been this commission achieving something. You wouldn't have had the 2 survivors leave. So for whatever reason...
And Law wouldn't be getting this honorable funeral.
Exactly.
And you didn't need the commission. The congregation, the doctrine and the faith, is charged with doing what the commission was supposed to do, and the congregation's been around for decades.
So it was all for show.
Yeah, so window dressing.
This is an institution where they still dress as they did in the 15th century. So what do you expect?
The most important thing, having your 2 survivors, your clients out today, I think was just a really important moment, and thanks to them and to you, Mitchell.
Best revenge is to lead a good, healthy life.
Well put. Marjorie, tomorrow, see you. Martha Coakley,
Jim,
thank you so much.
pleasure.
Mitchell, thanks for
Thank
all
you.
you do.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.